I paid cash for my house. 2 summers later, the first mortgage bill arrived. The envelope said, "Final notice." I was standing in my driveway in Port Cedar, a panhandle town where salt air eats mailbox paint, holding a debt I never took, addressed to a woman with my name. Same middle initial, same street, same parcel number. The only thing different was the signature on page 3. It was mine and not mine. My curve on the J, my habit of crossing the H like a fence post, but the line trembled in a way I've never trembled. It was a stranger doing a good impression. And if you think your signature is just a squiggle, wait until somebody steals it and builds a cage out of paper. I tucked the letter in my tote, as if the weight could go away if I lifted it right. Inside, the little cypress house smelled like coffee that had cooled longer than I meant and lemon oil from the furniture I rescued after the divorce. I put the kettle back on because hot coffee lies better than cold, and I sat at the table with a yellow legal pad, the one I buy in bulk because a diner manager lives by lists. At the top, I wrote what I know for sure. Under that, paid cash, recorded deed 2 summers ago, no mortgage. Under that, somebody filed one after. Under that, who? People think small towns are slow. They're not. They're fast at the exact things you hope will take forever. Gossip, foreclosure, a rumor can cross the river quicker than a truck. So I got ahead of it. I put on my Harbor House polo, old from 10,000 washes, and drove to the diner before opening so I could pull the bank statements. If a mortgage had somehow sprouted from an old mistake, I'd find the seed. All the while, the sun lifted itself through Spanish moss like a secret, one vine at a time. At the Harbor House, grease sings before dawn. I unlocked the back and the fans ticked alive, pulling last night's fries out of the rafters. I turned the lights on 1 row at a time. The kegs of sweet tea clinked in their ice bath. I walked through the quiet like I always do before the morning rush, a private parade of what I built and kept. I brewed a fresh pot and opened a laptop I keep in the office because the valet of a small business is always you. I logged into my credit union account. The Niners checking looked lean but normal. The house account, the one I set aside for taxes and repairs, showed a hold I didn't put there. Who asked permission? I said out loud, the office chair answering with a groan like an old man. The first customers of the day were Mr. Boone and his wife Loretta, as always. He fought in Vietnam and she fought with the school board until they stopped letting sugary cupcakes into the cafeteria. He eats his bacon like it wronged him, and she drinks her coffee like she could stand to invite the rest of the world in if the world agreed to behave. I fed them hush puppies just because, and told Dixie, my morning cook, I'd be back by 9. I slid the mortgage bill back into my tote and drove to Gulfbriar Community Credit Union. Eggshell brick, windows tinted just enough to say we don't want to see you unless we have to. Inside, a fake ficus leaned toward the light like a witness who wants to talk but knows better. A woman at a standing desk asked if I had an appointment in the sing-song that means I should have. It's about a mortgage attached to my house, I said. I don't have one, but I have a bill. She gave me the smile that says all bills are real until proven imaginary and sent me back to a glass-walled office decorated with photos of fishing trips, a big man grin, a silver tarpon like a flex. The nameplate read Kincaid. He shook my hand with a squeeze that felt like someone testing fruit. Miss Harper, he said, glancing at the file he hadn't opened yet. We're sorry for the confusion. Happens sometimes. Technology. He said technology the way a man says weather, a thing you can't fight and maybe admire if it knocks your fence down just right. I pay cash, I said. There's no lender. He flipped a page and nodded to himself like someone finding a sock where a sock should be. Looks like a small equipment note tied to Harbor House LLC, collateralized by your property address. If you're current, that bill's probably just a system prompt. I don't have an LLC, I said. I'm a sole proprietor. You sure? He said softly, almost kindly, as if I forget the structure of my own life. Sometimes accountants set them up, and I'm sure, I said. He shuffled papers, then clicked something on his computer. The screen flashed a PDF that reflected in his glasses, little black paragraphs scrolling. He didn't turn the monitor toward me. It said more than any paragraph could. He looked at a thing and decided it belonged to him to look at and me to wonder about. Then we're dealing with identity confusion, he said. Happens more than you'd think. I'll flag the account. You'll get a letter in a week saying it's resolved. He said resolved like a drain unclogged itself if you leave the water running long enough. I'll need a copy of whatever you're looking at, I said. He hesitated a breath too long and then his finger softened. We don't generally release loan files to non-borrowers, Miss Harper. Then call the borrower, I said, whoever she is. Tell her to come in and show me her face. He smiled broader, the way men do right before they hand you a candy to see if you'll stop asking about dinner. We'll get to the bottom of it, week tops. People nod when they know you won't go away. I did not nod. I left without thanking him. The parking lot had a ripple of heat already, and it was barely 8. I sat in my car and wrote on the legal pad, Kincaid says, Harbor House LLC, equipment note, collateral, my address. I underlined my address until the ink bled. When someone hands you a lie with a straight face, the only thing to do is go talk to paper. Paper doesn't have to be brave. It doesn't forget to hide its tells. So I drove to the Gulf Briar County Recorder. The clerk's office is a whole geography of stale air, metal shelves, and a copier that sounds like it's trying to remember when it was loved. 2 people were ahead of me, arguing about a fence line. A baby on somebody's hip threw a pacifier at a map of our county with red lines for parcels, blue for flood zones, yellow for the places tourists go that take pictures of pelicans. Can I help you? The front clerk asked when it was my turn. Her name tag said Trina. Her mouth said, let's keep it easy. I need to look up everything filed on parcel 12//S/18-/0000-14200-000 and on any entity named Harbor House LLC. Her eyebrows went up just a little. You know your parcel number. That's rare. I watched too many friends lose their houses to people who didn't know their parcel number, I said. She slid a form across the counter for a records request and pointed me toward a row of public terminals. You can search by name, address, parcel, instrument. If you need help, holler for Jada. She's the one born knowing how to talk to computers. Jada was younger than the furniture. Braids, a navy sweatshirt that said Gulf Briar Pirates, a ring through one eyebrow that looked like a commitment to an idea most of us grew out of. She tapped the space bar on a terminal like it had been sleeping too heavy. What are we looking for? She asked. Who signed my name? I said. She smiled without mocking me. That your legal theory or your life story? Both. We started with my name. It pulled up a marriage license from 1986, the divorce settlement from 21 years later, the deed I recorded the summer I paid cash, and then there it was. Instrument 2023-118340. Mortgage, borrower, June H. Harper. Lender, Gulf Briar Community Credit Union. Notary, Kimberly L. Booker. Recorded date, 3 months ago. The PDF opened with a sound that in my head was a drawer sliding at a morgue. If you've never stared at your own forgery, let me tell you, it feels like seeing your reflection wink when you didn't. The signature was close, closer than a friend might get. The H crossed late like I cross it when I'm tired, but the notary stamp was off. The expiration date was tiny, but the last digit had a hairline crack of ink through it, like a regret. The letters in Booker buckled. And the address they used for me was a P.O. box I never rented. The lender's box listed loan purpose, equipment acquisition for Harbor House LLC per addendum. The addendum had J.H. Harper typed and then a scribble. I never formed an LLC, I said. Jada typed like she could conjure facts by speed alone. She said, "There is a Harbor House LLC in our records, formed 2 days before the mortgage. Registered agent, a service out of Jacksonville. Manager, June Harper." She clicked the LLC filings. The manager's signature didn't match the mortgage signature. It matched nothing I've ever done. The loops were flamboyant. It was a person who loved to sign their name because their name was the least interesting part of what they believed they were owed. "Can I get a copy of the notary's log?" I asked. "Public record," Jada said, like a benediction. "But we need to request it directly from the notary. She has 10 days to respond. Florida sunshine law is a real thing when people act like it's not." She handed me a form and pointed at a blank where I could write questions. "Ask for the journal page with your signing date and any IDs copied." I filled it out. We stamped it. The ancient copier wheezed. "Do folks do this a lot?" "You mean lie on paper?" she said. "Often enough that I don't blink, but it's usually sloppier. This has polish." She printed the mortgage and slid it to me. "Take this," she said, "and keep breathing." Back at the diner, the lunch crowd formed with the weather. Truckers, teachers, tourists who got too curious about a map and ended up hungry in our zip code. I fed them all with the same hand I'd used to steady a horse. The letter in my tote burned a hole I couldn't feel until the shift slowed. Mr. Boone caught me wiping down the pie case. "You look like you found something that shouldn't exist," he said. "I found 2 somethings, a mortgage I never signed and a company I never formed, equipment I never bought. If this is a magic trick, I wasn't asked to pick a card." "You call the paper?" he asked, meaning our weekly, the Cedar Beacon. "I need more than a headline," I said. "I need the truth lined up with document numbers." "The truth loves a number," he said, as if he was telling me where to aim. "Bring me what you got tonight. Loretta makes chicken and dumplings on Wednesdays. Paper likes gravy." After the dinner rush, I drove the back roads to Mr. Boone's. The live oaks there are older than any mortgage. His house smells like cedar and a kind of stubborn clean. He put my copies on the table and went to get his reading glasses. He uses a flashlight to read documents even in a bright room because he says facts deserve a spotlight. "What's the notary's expiration?" he asked. 2025, I said. He flipped to the stamp like it had invited him. "I thought so. Look at the 5, smeared. That can happen. But look at the commission number. It doesn't match the stamp a month later." He unsleeved a folder of his own paperwork. Mr. Boone saves everything because war taught him that a slip of paper can put a plane in the air or take one down. Loretta had something notarized by this same woman last month. Her number ends with 36. Yours ends with 35. Could be different stamps, could be an error, or it could be 2 different people pretending to be Kim Booker.
"Who benefits?" I asked. A moral question he treated like math.
He tapped the line where Harbor House LLC appeared. "Whoever can create an entity with your name and move a loan through it. That requires a friendly path. A registered agent who doesn't ask right questions, a credit union willing to believe a brand new company needs a 6-figure equipment note, and a notary who thinks a stamp is something you use to play pretend." I went to the credit union, I said. Kincaid called it a glitch and told me to be patient. He laughed, and it wasn't kind. Glitch is what people call intent before they know if you've got proof. I drove home with the windows down so I could hear if the night had anything to add. Crickets argued the way they do when the air can't decide if it should be humid or merciful. I stood in my kitchen and looked at the deed pinned behind a magnet on my fridge, the unlawful paper echoing in my head like a song I didn't choose. Then I wrote letters. I wrote to the notary. I wrote to the credit union asking for any and all documents associated with Harbor House LLC or with my parcel number. I wrote to the Florida Department of State asking for the LLC file. I wrote to myself, don't break, if you can help it. If you break, break in a way that makes a useful angle. The first call came from my daughter, Willa. She and her husband, Cody, live on the other side of the river, in a townhouse development with a pool you can only use if you know the gate code. They have my first grandson, and both of them work more than they admit. She FaceTimed me from the pantry so the baby wouldn't wake. Mom, she said, eyes big, is it true? Did you get a foreclosure letter? Not foreclosure, I said, just a bill like a heads up I didn't ask for. I paid cash. We recorded. I'm dealing with it. She chewed her lip. Cody's uncle sits on a board with the credit union people. He says it's probably a clerical issue. Clerical issues don't file LLCs, I said, and don't tell your uncle yet. I want to have it lined up before I give anybody a chance to line it down. She nodded. Do you need money? She asked. That is love, an offer of money when what you need is a map. I need you to come eat pie on Friday. Bring the baby. We're going to fill the place and take names. 2 days later, the notary wrote back. Her email had no punctuation, but a period between every 2 words, like she was trying to make everything sound like a fact. Dear Ms. Harper, my log indicates you appeared before me on June 14th at 3:30 p.m. State ID presented, ending 4974. Signature affixed in my presence. Best, K. Booker. On June 14th at 3:30 p.m., I was at the diner running the register because my afternoon cashier's car died on the causeway. I checked the Square Terminal report. I checked the CCTV we keep above the pie case. I watched myself hand a man exact change for banana pudding and yell, "Order up" to Dixie. For the first time in my life, I was grateful for the way I look on camera. Tired, real, exactly where I said I'd been. I downloaded the snippet. Jada would know what to do with timestamps. The Sunshine Law request to the credit union got me a different kind of punctuation. Their lawyer replied with a letterhead and the word confidential in every paragraph, as if repeating it would make it harder to read. They refused to provide loan files, citing privacy. They did, however, admit to a relationship with Harbor House LLC, an entity they believed to be related to me. They said they'd be happy to discuss resolution. The letter was signed by a firm out of Tallahassee with a name that sounded like family money and horse farms. I took the letters to Jada. She looked younger every time I saw her, which I think is what youth looks like when it's brave inside a hierarchy. She squinted at the notary's email, at my video clip, at the lawyer's refusal. Her fingers walked across the keyboard while her mind ran a different race. We can check the e-recording log, she said. Every document that comes into county gets a digital footprint. Who uploaded it, from what account. We can't see inside their network, but we can see the name they used to walk in our front door. She slid her chair aside so I could see. She clicked a tab marked Administrative. It asked for a password. She typed it like a person who knows where she keeps her power. This is a look, not a leak. she said, "but you'll want to know. The mortgage was submitted by R. Harrow Development, LLC. Harrow. Cody's uncle Ray Harrow sits on the city's development board. I breathed his name like a taste I didn't like, a spice somebody used instead of salt. Could be a coincidence, Jada said, but she didn't sound convinced. Developers record all sorts of things. Developers don't usually file mortgages for diners they didn't build, I said. True, she said. But somebody in that office had the login, or someone they share it with. I can print the submission confirmation. It won't have an IP, but it'll have the timestamp and the submitter ID. Print it, I said, then print 2 more. At home, I put the copies in a binder I bought the day I signed my divorce papers. The binder has red tabs because red makes it easier to keep your place. Each tab got a title: Deed, Mortgage, LLC, Notary, E-Record. The next tab I labeled with the slow attention I used to write on cakes: Town. There is a moment in any fight where you realize nobody but you is going to pick the time and place. Friday night, I picked my own. We called it Pie Night, and we pretended it was just a special with bandstand music from the radio, string lights sagging over the parking lot, and a raffle for a basket of sauces and jams. We put flyers on the corkboard at the bait shop and the bulletin at the church. And we told people if they'd ever had something recorded against their house they didn't understand, come eat pie and bring the paper. We sold out of pecan before the first guitar solo ended. People want sweetness when something is bitter. People want to be seen when the paper only writes down half their name. I waited until the coffee refill slowed, then I stepped onto the little cement step by the back door, where on hurricane days I've told people where to hide. I held the binder. I told my town that I got a mortgage I didn't take. I told them I paid cash and how a company with my name had been formed around me like a trap, and how the document came into the county through a login used by a man who has apps named after himself. I didn't say Ray, I said a development company. You say names when you're ready to carry what comes next. I wasn't, not yet. A hand went up by the soda fountain. It belonged to a man who sells bait in the morning and lifts weights at a gym made entirely of metal machines older than he is. He held up a sheet of paper with a county stamp. I got one of these last year, he said. They told me I defaulted on a microloan. I never asked for a micro anything. I lost 2 months arguing and then they dropped it without saying sorry. Loretta stepped forward with a folder from her purse like a magic trick. She had a UCC1 financing statement against her sewing machines, filed by a lender she'd never met. An older woman from the Methodist choir said the county had filed a lien for a code violation. She appealed and won, but it took 6 months and 12 trips to the courthouse. And when she sold, the title company wanted proof like she wasn't telling the truth already. Bring your papers, I said. Tomorrow, 3 o'clock. We'll sit here and we'll make a map. If they want to play paperwork, we'll play it in public. The next afternoon, we pushed tables together and covered them with manila. Jada came with her laptop and a face like a person walking into a test she studied for and also wrote. Mr. Boone brought highlighters. I made a chart that started with names and ended with instrument numbers. We circled anything filed within the last 3 years under the same 3 sources: Gulf Briar Community Credit Union, R. Harrow Development, and a financing company out of Mobile with a shell website that looked like a cardboard storefront.
patterns do what they want to do. They reveal the same notary popped up on 4 different mortgages filed within a month. The same registered agent sat in between dozen people's names and the state. In every case, the borrower had never met the notary. The stamp had the same faint crack through the final digit. "I know Kim," Loretta said, rubbing the same place on the stamp with her finger like she could warm the truth out of it. "She notarized a will. She looked us in the eye. She asked for ID. That was 4 months after this stamp says she saw June. She wasn't even in town the day this claims she was. She was at her niece's wedding in Tallahassee. I saw the pictures." "Pictures are a kind of record," I said, and the whole table bent toward the idea like sunflowers.
We made a plan. We would call a town hall. We would invite the county recorder, the credit union, and anybody whose name ended up on our map. We would not accuse, we would present. Facts are heavy enough without teeth. I called Pastor Elaine, who runs the little white church with the tall bell tower and the kind of paint job that looks new more often than the budget says it is. She said we could use the fellowship hall if we promised to stack the chairs after. By Monday, I had a letter slid under my diner door before dawn. Thin paper, thick logo. It was a cease and desist, signed by the credit union's lawyer, telling me that if I defamed their client, they'd seek damages. People who have something to be proud of don't start by threatening money. I taped the letter inside my binder under a tab I labeled Bluff. When you put your finger on something other people want you to ignore, the air changes. My health inspector, who has always been fair in a way that feels like love, came at 11 with a second guy in a suit I don't know. They were polite. They measured the temperature of the chicken salad like it had personally offended them. They asked about a permit for the string lights. They left with nothing because I keep my kitchen the way you keep a place people trust you to feed them in. But I could feel the wind shift. I could measure it by the way Kincaid came in later for a coffee, like he'd never been, like he wanted to see me with his own eyes. He paid in cash and left the cup half full on the counter so his prints could linger. The town hall came on a Tuesday. We dragged the projector from the high school. Jada wore a blazer that belonged to her cousin and shoes that didn't because her feet are careful in a way brains sometimes forget to be. Mr. Boone set up chairs in rows like church, but angled the last 3 so latecomers could see without shame. Pastor Elaine put out a water jug in real cups instead of plastic because she believes we shouldn't make trash out of other people's truth. People came. Retirees in golf shirts, young men in neon shirts with their company names on the pocket, moms in leggings with babies tied to their front, a handful of officials, a handful of smiles that didn't touch eyes. Kincaid sat 2 rows back, jacket on his knees, and Ray Harrow, his hair perfect and his pocket square a little too much, took a chair like a man claiming a square foot of land by looking at it. I stood at the mic and said my name. I said I paid cash. I said a mortgage was recorded anyway. I said an LLC with my name was formed in my absence. Then I clicked to the first slide, a screenshot of instrument 2023-118340, my mortgage. The room rustled when they saw the stamp. I pointed to the notary's commission number. I pointed to the expiration date, the hairline crack through the 5. I clicked to Loretta's document, the same stamp, different date. I clicked to another and another. I'm not an attorney, but a pattern is a sermon you can see. I clicked to the e-recording screenshot, the submission confirmation with R. Harrow Development, LLC as the submitter. I didn't look at Ray when I said it. I watched the room. A murmur rose and fell like a boat in wake. Ray stood up without being asked to and straightened his jacket like a man preparing to be a picture. Our firm records many documents, he said. We assist citizens with filings. We are not a lender, nor a notary, nor responsible for the choices of either. What were you assisting me with? I asked. He smiled. If you'd like to make an appointment, we can review your file.
I made one, I said. It's tonight. Kincaid stood to say the credit union cares deeply about its members, and any error would be corrected promptly. He used the word error 5 times and the word compliance 3. He said microloan partners and community engagement. He mentioned the Fair Lending Act as if the act would clap for him. Jada stepped to the front while he was still speaking and plugged in the laptop. The screen shifted to a spreadsheet with 3 columns: instrument, submitter, notary. Rows of numbers, repeated names, a trail you could follow blindfolded if your hands remembered shape. We requested the notary's log. We received copies for each dated issue. On June 14th, when Miss Harper allegedly appeared, the notary's log shows 6 entries between 12:30 and 1:45 p.m., all for documents filed by R. Harrell Development, then a gap until 6 p.m. Miss Harper's entry is written in different ink on a line that has been taped and replaced. The ID number listed, 4974, matches Miss Harper's driver's license from 3 years ago. She renewed in April. Her current license ends in 5018. The room got the kind of quiet that saves lives. Even the babies held their breath like the world had something to say.
We also requested the notary's bond, Jada continued. There were 2 claims this spring. Both paid. Both involve mortgages where the borrowers claimed they never appeared. Both notarizations were done at the credit union. Kincaid's jaw flexed. Ray crossed his arms like a gate. Finally, she said, we reviewed the county's e-recording logs. On the days in question, the same user account uploaded the documents within minutes of each other. That account belongs to R. Harrow Development. There is no evidence of their staff's direct wrongdoing. There is also no evidence they took steps to verify identities when serving as a conduit. Ray cleared his throat. We provide a public service, he said. We rely on the integrity of the professionals we work with. Integrity is measurable, Mr. Boone said from the 3rd row, louder than a man his age has any right to be. Sometimes it's a stamp that doesn't line up. Sometimes it's the truth lined up with time. I put the time-stamped video from my pie case on the screen. There I was at 3:28 p.m. on June 14th, pouring coffee. The camera time matched the register log, matched the chicken delivery ticket, matched the storm cloud that sat over the bay and let down rain right at 4 like it had a meeting. The room watched me be in exactly the one place I said I was. I had never loved my ordinary day so much. Kincaid swallowed something he didn't want to taste. He said, we will review internally. I closed the binder and opened my hands. I'm not out for blood, I said. I'm out for my name, and I'm out for every person in this room whose signature lives somewhere it doesn't belong. After the meeting, a deputy who knows how to say a lot with a nod asked if I'd like to come in and make a statement. I did. Statements are just stories with a court reporter watching you breathe. Then the state attorney's office called and asked for copies. They asked for Jada's map. They asked for the notary's log. They asked for the video of me handing banana pudding to a man who said he'd lost 20 pounds but would gain them back for this. The next week moved like an old machine with fresh oil. There was a hearing. The courtroom smells like wood and dust, and the kind of patience judges wear because it keeps them from drowning. The notary, Kim Booker, sat in a navy dress like an apology. When they swore her in, her voice trembled, and I felt something like pity open an eye inside me and then shut it for later. She said she knew she'd notarized my signature because her log said she had. The state held up the log, the tape visible like a bandage after a fight. She said she must have written it late and taped it in because she left the office early that day for her niece's wedding. They showed a Facebook post with a photo of her under a gazebo 2 counties away, time-stamped 3 hours before the signature she swore she watched happen.
She said she was confused. They asked if she'd ever notarized documents without the signer present. She paused, like a person deciding whether to save herself by admitting to a smaller sin. She said she had, once or twice, for bank officers she trusted. Kincaid sat so still I wondered if he'd practiced. Ray breathed through his nose like a thoroughbred. My lawyer, Miguel, from Legal Aid, who shook my hand as if it could take the place of money, said very little. He showed the judge the mortgage, the stamp, the log, the video. He said these words, void ab initio, which is what you say when you want to put something back before it was born. The judge looked at the papers like they were children who had wandered into her yard. Then she said in a voice that could cut wood that the instruments recorded against my property without legal authority were null and would be canceled. She signed orders like she was putting nails back in a bag. The county recorder filed a satisfaction of mortgage and marked it as canceled. Ray's development firm released a statement saying they had cooperated fully and were shocked to learn of irregularities. The credit union's board put Kincaid on leave and said they'd hired an outside firm to review procedures. People said the word review like it was a wash strong enough to take out blood. A week later, the state charged the notary with falsifying notarizations. They followed the line to a clerk at the credit union who admitted to bringing stacks of documents to the notary to expedite filings. The clerk said Kincaid told her to. Kincaid said he had no idea. He said expedites happened, not fraud. He said if a notary said a person was present, a banker believed them the way a pastor believes a hymn. It moved to grand jury. After, I kept running the diner.
When bad paper goes quiet, good paper should talk. So I printed everything and duct taped the edges and turned my binder into something you could put on a table without worrying it would break. We held classes on Tuesday nights. We called them record nights because there's a kind of power in a name that suggests music. People brought their deeds and their liens and their UCC filings and their probate puzzles. We projected parcel maps on the wall and taught each other how to read legal descriptions so we could find our own corners in the world. Jada brought her cousin who designs websites, and we built a database called the Paper Lantern. Any citizen can type in an instrument number and see what it says, who filed it, and when. A volunteer lawyer from Pensacola came 3 times and told us which parts of the law feel like doors and which feel like windows. We learned to knock on both. Willa came every other week with the baby asleep in a car seat in a wheeled diaper bag that looks like she planned for an airport but landed at Community. Cody came once and stood in the back with his hands in his pockets, watching. He said afterward that his uncle was having a bad run of press. He used the word press like rain. I told him weather doesn't choose who we are. He said he knew that. 2 months later, he said it out loud to his uncle, and Thanksgiving was quieter than usual, but nobody died. That's its own kind of win. Ray resigned from the board, and the development firm's name came off the list of e-recording submitters. Kincaid took a job 2 counties over, where I imagine he files things without leaving fingerprints. The credit union cut a check to reimburse my filing fees and the attorney's hours, though they called it a goodwill gesture. Goodwill is what you call cost when you can't afford to call it guilt. I spent the check on new stools for the counter and a sign for record night that hangs above the coffee urn. It says, "Who signed my name?" in block letters big enough to see from the parking lot. People come in to take pictures with it, and I don't mind. A truth that needed to be hidden doesn't deserve to hide again. Sometimes folks ask if I ever found out who actually formed Harbor House LLC. The paper trail ends at a registered agent in Jacksonville who handled 100 filings a week. The state shut them down for deficiencies in verification. They paid a fine and called the experience instructive. Instructive is a word you use when you get to keep what you learned and what you took. We didn't get to make that part right. We did make the lien go away. We did make a map. We did make a room where the folder under your bed doesn't have to be a monster anymore. Life didn't turn into a movie just because I stood up in a microphone. My grease trap still backs up on Thursdays. The delivery truck still gets stuck behind the drawbridge every time a tourist decides to photograph a boat. I still have to tell Randy to wash his hands between handling catfish and handling onions. Nobody gives you an Oscar for reading an instrument number. But the first time a widow brought in a manila envelope with 6 years of paperwork she hadn't opened because she couldn't bear to, and we sat together and drew a line from the first bill to the day the county misapplied a payment, and we called and fixed it, and she went home lighter than she arrived, I felt a kind of applause that has nothing to do with clapping. I never did get my apology. Nobody in a suit came to eat pie and say sorry. People who are good at paper are often bad at sorry. That's okay. The thing I wanted back wasn't an apology. It was my name, my corner, my signature. We framed my deed and hung it by the register with the canceled mortgage right beside it, both of them laminated so the steam from the griddle wouldn't sweat through. People ask me what the second one is. I say it's a souvenir from the time someone tried to sign for me and the town said, try again.
The day we launched the paper lantern, Mr. Boone wore his old army cap, and Loretta brought cupcakes, even though she doesn't believe in sugar anymore. Because there are days when you bless a room by breaking your own rule. Jada, in her blazer, cut a ribbon with scissors the school lent us. Pastor Elaine led a prayer in a voice that sounds like wood, which is to say sturdy. We made a list of 5 things everybody should know: your parcel number, your home state exemption status, where your deed is, which liens are legitimate, and what your signature looks like when you're frightened. Not because people mean to sign badly, but because fear does a thing to hands. And if you ever have to sign in a room you didn't plan to visit, you should know yourself. Sometimes I wake in the night and listen to the refrigerator tick and the bay breathe. I think about how close I came to becoming a woman who wishes herself smaller. I think about how many of us there are, wives and widows, veterans and checkers, teenagers with 2 jobs and a car note, all of us living in houses held together by trust and 2x6s, all of us one stamped lie away from a stranger's name on our porch. Then I get up and write numbers on a yellow pad, because action warms the hands when fear tries to. If it sounds dramatic, that's only because it was. It has been a year since the hearing. We still have record night. We added a section called Ask the Assessor, where someone from the county sits and answers questions about millage and valuation, because sometimes a fight teaches you you're not alone, and sometimes it just teaches you that a person with a badge wants to be decent with you if you make it safe for them to be. We started a co-op, 5 of us, pooling a little money each month to help a neighbor who needs a document fee this week and will pay it forward next. We call it Paper Plain because the opposite of fancy is honest. The co-op meets the second Sunday at the diner. We pass a jar and we write down what we did with it. It's not a miracle. It's better. It's slow. Once in a while, a reporter calls and wants me to be angry on demand. I can be. I also like being calm. Calm scares people who thought they could nudge you. Calm makes space for facts to have their mouths open. Calm makes pie taste the way you remember. My daughter asks if I'm dating, as if that would be the second half of some arc that books taught her. I tell her no, and also I'm not. There is a man who delivers ice to the diner who smells like peppermint and diesel and says, "How are you, June?" like he means it.
Sometimes he sits on the back step between runs and we drink coffee and do the kind of calculus adults do. How much past is too much to bring into a conversation? How little future is rude? We don't make plans. He shows up when his schedule and mine agree by accident, and we let that be a story without a plot. It is enough. If it changes, I'll know because I know what my name looks like and what it looks like when somebody tries to write it for me. The last Thursday of hurricane season, I found a manila envelope on my porch with no return address. Inside, a photocopy of a ledger page, a list of names, amounts, processing fees. Mine was there, with a date that matched the mortgage I unmade. There was a sticky note. Thought you'd like to know how they kept score. I didn't recognize the handwriting. I didn't need to. Sometimes the world gives you a whole second half of a truth, and sometimes it gives you a post-it that says, keep going. I taped that ledger page to the inside of the binder under a tab called Hints. Then I swept my porch, because salt blows in, because pine needles fall, because you can win and still have to tidy up. I went to work. The grill hissed. The bell over the door chimed. People told me their stories over eggs. And when the lunch lull came, I poured a coffee, black, and stood at the register, under the framed deed, under the canceled mortgage, under the sign that says, "Who signed my name?" A man I didn't know stood there holding his own folder. He looked like he'd been living with paper too long. "Can I help you?" I asked, the phrase a habit and a vow. "I think somebody signed for me," he said. "I don't know where to start." "Start with numbers," I said. "Then we'll move to names." He smiled in that tired way that happens when you remember you live in a town. He sat. I opened the binder. We turned to a clean page. He told me his parcel number, or tried to. I wrote it down right the first time. We followed the line from his first bill to his worst fear, and then to the place a copy machine hums like a lullaby. There are days when I think I can feel a signature forming in the air like a storm. Then I remember storms pass and roofs remain because people climbed and nailed. We are not just what is written about us. We are what we write. The day we burned the first canceled mortgage at the annual fall festival, because sometimes closure needs a little theater, the crowd gathered in a circle by the fire pit behind the high school. We fed old paper to new flame. I held my canceled copy, and the wind took a corner of it and folded it back like a page I dog-eared. The edges darkened and curled. People cheered the way you do for a small good thing that stands in for a larger good thing you hope for. Jada took a photo that ended up on the Paper Lantern homepage. It's just a blur of orange and a laugh you can't hear. I look younger in it than I am. That's what happens when a weight gets off you. I got home that night to a power flicker, and the kind of quiet that means the bay is thinking. I made tea, because coffee lives on a schedule and tea waits for your mood. I sat at my table with the yellow legal pad and wrote 3 lines. I paid cash, they filed a lie, we filed the truth, and then I wrote the thing I didn't know I knew until the ink made it visible. Tomorrow we'll teach someone else to read. The first winter, cold snapped the way glass does when you run it under hot water by mistake. People came into the diner, rubbing their hands, breathing into their fingers like fog machines. I brought out a pot of chili big enough to hide in, and a girl with purple hair who'd moved to town last month sat by the window and asked me what a homestead exemption was. I told her. She said nobody ever taught me that in school. Me neither, I said. That's why we're here. Record night grew into record afternoon for people who work nights. We kept a little basket by the register where people could put the names of neighbors whose houses looked like paperwork had been left in the rain too long. We didn't shame anybody. Shame doesn't do what it promises. We knocked on doors with coffee and sat at kitchen tables with tax receipts and court stamps and helped people find the line that begins and the line that ends. When we couldn't fix it, we told them how to walk into the courthouse without feeling like a trespasser. Sometimes we went with them. The security guard knows my name and calls me Miss June in a voice that makes me feel both old and necessary. Spring brought tourists and sandals and a graduation we filmed from 6 angles. Jada wore a cap and gown and I cried like an aunt. She's leaving in August for a job at the county in a place with more cows than we have right here. She says she'll be back on holidays to teach a class called You Can Do This. I told her I'll set the projector up and make sliders. She said she'll bring cookies shaped like stamps. I told her that was dark and she laughed. People ask what I learned, and I say this: paper isn't neutral. It leans toward the hand that holds the stamp, but light leans toward openness. If you put enough eyes on a lie, it becomes shyer. If you put enough hands on a task, it becomes lighter. And if you stand in a room where you once felt alone and say out loud, "Who signed my name?" something changes in the floor. It stops being a stage and becomes a table.
Once in a while, late, I take out the legal pad from that first day and look at my list, what I know for sure. The first line, paying cash, looks like a prayer now. The second, somebody filed one after, looks like a test question you can answer if you studied. The third, who, looks like the beginning of a book I didn't know I could write. Every time I read it, I add a fourth line, how we stopped it. I don't promise forever to anybody anymore, not because I'm bitter, but because I like the taste of today. If you sit at the counter at noon, you can hear me tell a man from Ohio that the hush puppies are made with cornmeal and a secret I'd have to marry him to reveal. If you sit at the corner table at 7, you can hear me say to a teacher I've known since she was in my Sunday school, "What does your homestead document say on the second page?" And she'll say, "I don't know." And we'll open it and find out, and she'll go home a person who knows a new piece of herself. If you walk in with the folder and a face like a storm got out of a boat and climbed into you, we'll get you coffee and a pen and a chair that doesn't wobble. We'll make a map. We'll use the projector if we have to. And when you leave, whether you are fixed or only started, you'll put your hand on the door and you'll look at the sign and you'll know you live in a town where we ask the right question. We built a mural on the side of the Harbor House because the high school art club needed a wall and I needed something bigger than a deed to look at when I poured coffee. It's a painted hand holding a pen, and at the tip of the pen, the line turns into a town. Roofs, a pier, a diner with a window that looks like mine. Under it, in big letters, a kindergartner could read. It says, "We write our own names." People take photos in front of it. Some of them don't understand what it means. Some of them do and cry a little. I keep a box of napkins handy. I tell them the napkins are on the house, but the story is theirs. The night the first redbud bloomed after that ugly winter, I stayed late and cleaned the griddle like a ritual. The bell over the door jingled, even though I'd locked it. Old buildings like to pretend. And I laughed at myself and talked to the empty room. Thank you for holding. Thank you for not breaking when I did. Thank you for being here for the people who will need you next. The lights buzzed like crickets. I turned them off one by one, like a blessing. On the drive home, the bay was dark and the highway was so empty it felt like a promise you make to yourself when nobody's looking. I parked, breathed the night, and went inside. On the counter, the legal pad waited like an old friend. I wrote one last thing before bed. The future signs for itself. I'll be there when it does. And in the morning, when the post came with its steady little punch of possibilities, there was nothing with the word mortgage in it. There was a letter from a woman 2 towns over who said she heard about record night and wondered if we could help her figure out why a lien from 20 years ago was still sitting on her title like a bad tenant. I made coffee.
I put on my Harbor House polo, I put her letter on top of the binder, then I stepped into the day I had chosen, like a signature I didn't have to check twice.